It's late 1932. The Australian military, armed with machine guns and the confidence of a global power, deploys to the fields of Western Australia. Their mission is to declare war. And their enemy? Well, their enemy was a bird.
I mean, just let that sink in. That was the official assessment from the commanding officer, Major G.P.W. Meredith. So you have to ask, what kind of adversary could possibly provoke a statement like that? How on earth did a modern army find itself locked in a battle, and frankly, a losing one, with a large flightless bird?
Welcome to Inside History HD. Together, we will peel back the layers of narratives long locked away in the archives of history. We're going to use the original reports to understand not just what happened, but why.
Right, so a conflict this strange doesn't just appear out of thin air. It was really the result of a perfect storm, a kind of butterfly effect, where the deep scars of a world war and the massive shock of a global economic collapse created the perfect conditions for one of history's most bizarre military operations.
You see, the stage for all this was set years earlier. After World War I, Australia promised its returning veterans a new life by granting them land. The problem was, this land was often marginal, incredibly difficult to farm. Then, the Great Depression hits, the global economy shatters, wheat prices just collapse, and all those government promises of aid, they just evaporated. These farmers, these decorated veterans, were pushed right to the absolute brink.
And this wasn't just a string of bad luck. The system itself was already failing. We know from the 1929 Justice Pike Report, which was this detailed socio-political analysis of the period, that it had already documented the settlement scheme's deep instability. It highlighted shrinking profits and a resentment that was just growing and growing. This was a crisis just waiting for a trigger.
And that trigger, well, it arrived on two very long legs. An army of about 20,000 emus, driven out of Australia's interior by a severe drought, started migrating toward the coast. They stumbled upon these new farms and found what must have felt like paradise, acres and acres of wheat and easy access to water. For the farmers, who were already at their wits' end, this was the final straw.
So the farmers did what you might expect. They petitioned the government for help. And in a decision that feels almost unbelievable today, the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, actually agreed to deploy the military. This wasn't framed as simple pest control. Oh no. This was pitched as a genuine military engagement.
The plan, on paper, seemed pretty straightforward. 3 soldiers, led by Major Meredith, were sent out with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. They expected a quick, decisive operation. That confidence, well, it pretty much evaporated on the very first day.
You see, there was a fundamental mismatch between their technology and the emu's tactics. The Lewis gun is a weapon of trench warfare. It's designed for stationary, masked targets. But the emus, they were a completely different kind of enemy. The moment the soldiers opened fire, the flock didn't flee as one big herd. No, they broke into countless small units, scattering in every direction at nearly 30 miles per hour. The attempt to mount a gun on a truck was an even bigger disaster. The ride was way too bumpy to aim, and in one now famous incident, an emu got tangled in the steering, causing the truck to crash right through a fence.
Ornithologist D.L. Cerventi, who wrote about the incident, just captured the dilemma perfectly. It was as if the emus were using guerrilla tactics. They were a decentralized, unpredictable biological force, and the Army's conventional, centralized firepower was completely and utterly useless against them.
So get this, over the entire course of the operation, the military fired this many rounds of ammunition. That's almost their whole supply.
And this was the result. Major Meredith's final report claimed just 986 confirmed kills. If you do the math, that is a ratio of exactly 10 rounds of ammunition for every single emu. It was just a staggering display of inefficiency. The military pulled out in early December, and as you can imagine, the press had a field day. Newspapers in Australia and Britain just mocked the whole operation. Politicians were joking that if any medals were going to be awarded, they should go to the emus, since they had, quote, won every round so far. The lost war became this national joke. But the farmers' problem was still very, very real.
So after that public failure, the government switched tactics. They replaced the centralized military operation with a decentralized, market-based solution, a bounty system. And the difference was, well, it was staggering. As it's noted in the Journal of Australian Studies, this new approach was vastly more effective. In just 6 months, hunters claimed bounties for over 57,000 emus.
But you know, even the bounty system wasn't the final answer. The most effective, most permanent solution turned out to be the most practical one, just building better fences. Strong, emu-proof fencing finally secured the farmlands. The problem was solved not with bullets, but with simple, effective infrastructure. When you look back, the resonance of this truly bizarre story isn't just in its absurdity. It really functions as a cautionary tale, and it perfectly charts the evolution of the emu's status in the Australian imagination, from a reviled pest to a protected national symbol.
This timeline shows such a profound shift in thinking. The very same bird that appears on Australia's coat of arms was officially declared vermin in 1922 just so they could be culled. 10 years later, the army is sent to destroy them. But then, fast forward to 1999, and under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, the wild emu becomes a formally protected species. It's a complete 180.
So in the end, this was never really just a story about birds, was it? It was about desperate people, a government trying to project authority in a time of crisis, and the humbling lesson that a complex ecological problem can't always be solved by pointing a gun at it.
The whole conflict leaves us to wrestle with a question that really echoes through to the modern day. What happens when the tools of war are used to try and solve the problems of nature?
If this journey has offered you a new perspective, support our exploration by subscribing to Insight History HD. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next narrative.